All right, Greg.
Hey,
Good morning,
Jorge.
sir.
Yeah, good morning.
Well, it's good to
It's
see
our
you.
first live stream, I'm excited.
Yeah, same here. And we just before we jumped on, we were having a bit of a fingernail biting moment, trying to get everything set up right. It's
Yeah.
like very we're very much kind of figuring it out as we go. But we are doing what I think are interesting things, and we were hoping to share with folks. And this seemed like an easy way to do it. Do you wanna explain a bit about what this is all about?
Yeah, thank you for setting it up nicely. And actually talking about how this is actually an unfinished moment in and of itself. Jorge and I have known each other for a long time, and we've worked together at moments, and we're both really fascinated by, where we are right now. The culture and the implementation of technology and AI. And I think we both feel like a lot of the things that we've learned in the past aren't really applicable in this new environment, and that we have to learn new things. And at some level, learning those new things means disrupting ourselves and examining, practices that, we've held dear over the last 20 years in our careers and seeing if they're still valid, and then also exploring the territory that's available in this new space, right? And I think we started that conversation and decided, hey, let's put something together, and so we started this thing we're calling Unfinish. The D is missing on purpose, and it tells a story about I think the market in the space and the place that we find ourselves in. I don't know, maybe you could talk a little bit more about your I'm taking some airtime here. So you jump in and talk a little bit about what you think Unfinished is.
Well, I just wanted to pinch on something you said. I think you said that the things that we learned in the past aren't applicable. Is that what you said?
I said that we need to re-examine
Yeah.
yeah, I did, but I think what I really meant was we need to examine whether they are still applicable.
Right, right. Well, the reason I started there is because there's a flip side to that, which is that as disruptive as the current moment feels, and we're talking specifically about AI, right? Like there's a new technology, major new technology that is upending a lot of things. And as disruptive as this moment feels, both you and I have been through another disruptive moment like this, which was the dot-com, the appearance of the World Wide Web in particular, right? Like that was a major thing. And we now kind of take it for granted because it's become so pervasive in our world. But I remember going through that time when design was up in the air and publishing was up in the air. Like there were all these things where it's like, well, this needs to be reinvented clearly because we have this different thing happening, right?
Yeah,
Um, and in retrospect, it feels like, well, of course, that's how it would turn out, but it wasn't. It wasn't obvious at the time,
yeah,
and it entailed a lot of experimentation. And um, and part of the reason why, circling back to unfinished and the concept of making things that are unfinished, is I think that we have this drive for closure. We want things to be like neatly wrapped up.
yeah,
But in times of transformational change like we're going through now, we don't really know how things are going to turn out. We don't really understand the technology's implications yet, really. We're in the process of discovering that. And like one of the things that I learned, and maybe you can chime in on your experience, but one of the things that I learned from the previous wave of disruption that I was part of was that you can have these kind of big ideas about how the technology is going to transform things. You can have ideals about how it should transform things. But the changes actually happen more incrementally through a more kind of bottom-up approach with people trying things, seeing what sticks, and then that is what affects the transformation. So
Yeah, it's a maker builder mindset, right? It's I oftentimes talk about some people think to make and others make to think, and I think we're both makers. And I think one of the things that's interesting about this space is it's emergent, right? There's a conversation going on. It's really fast, so that I think that's one of the things that's a little bit different. If the dot-com era moved fast, this era is moving super fast because every week there's some new model or some new capability or some new discovery or some new piece of insight. So it's challenging, and I actually think that's one of the things that we're thinking about with Unfinished is also helping organizations make sense of the moment by making practical things. And I think our insight is that, we're not like suggesting that we're super experts in this space. But what we are saying is that maybe we're 8 weeks ahead of you, and we can help be a little bit of a Rosetta Stone or a wayfinder for organizations around how to understand how to use these tools and think about it in a really practical way. And I think that that's the basis behind why we think Unfinished is as a consulting practice is actually valuable and necessary right now, because I think in the space that we're looking at, which is small and medium business, and this is something we should also talk a little bit, like why are we looking at the SMB space? Um, there's a whole bunch of opportunities to help organizations punch above their weight, to help them maybe manage some of their complexity more effectively so that they can focus their attention and energy on the things that they really love or growing their business in a way that makes sense to them. And some of these tools do give you some superpowers. And so how can we help organizations, make sense of which ones to use and which outcomes, are more applicable now and are most useful. And so I think that is a journey that I think we want to help people on. And just back to why we're calling ourselves Unfinished, this is, I think, one of the things that I think business leaders have to recognize in this moment is that you are either evolving or you're not, and that transformation is something that you need to continuously invest in and have a mindset around. And so your point earlier that you talked about closure or completion or having it all figured out. I think the ethos now is to, jive in and experiment and make and find your way and keep on that path and just recognize that you need to keep moving forward.
I love that you use the word evolve, and I will draw a distinction between evolving and reinventing.
Yeah.
Because so much of what one reads out there, with people writing about AI, and I have seen this with a lot of other consultancies. It's like the pitch is, you need to reinvent your business for the AI age.
Yeah.
And I think that our approach is more, you know what? That sounds like premature optimization for a world we don't really understand yet. It's much better to try these very carefully defined pragmatic experiments that help you make steps towards an alternative future, as opposed to this whole like huge initiative where it's like, let's reinvent everything
Yeah.
and rethink everything from the ground up. All right, let's not belabor Unfinished itself. We'll
Yeah.
have more opportunities in the future to talk about what we're doing in the business. We we're talking about superagency, and this is a book that I had not read. You
Yeah.
suggested this book,
Mm.
um,
Yeah.
and I was hoping that you talk a bit about why superagency, why this book, and what is this idea about?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the pieces of content this year that I think tries to unpack where we are in this moment. And I think Hoffman's book has a couple of tenets in it that I like. One, he talks about technical or technological transformations historically, and sort of recognizes the societal disruption and the ramifications of that in those moments to sort of try to give us a compass for what's happening right now. And so, what do I mean by that? He talks about, the invention of the steam engine. He talks about, the reaction to, industrialization and the Luddite movement. We have, and he has a kind of a model for, two by two of like, different characteristics of people who are have a point of view about where AI is from, when he calls it doomers who believe it's the end of everything, and, the zoomers who are like, no regulation, no, AI at all costs, et cetera. And that framework, I think, starts to establish, and then I think there's bloomers and then gloomers, right? So those are the four quadrants. Um, you know, I tend to see myself as a bloomer, but that's because I'm an optimist and I believe that we get to choose the future we want to live if we're intentional about how we operate. And I think this is one of the things that's very important actually about right now, that we need to be looking at these tools in a really smart way and make sure that humans are in the center of the conversation. And the last tenet in his book, is around agency, and that these systems should enable us to have agency, that we get to make decisions, that we get to make choice, that we get to use them for things that we think are valuable. Um, it obviously there'll be some disruption in employment for sure, but there'll be new opportunities that emerge out of this technology change as well. And so, I think the that's why I thought the book was interesting, is that it was sort of trying to put this into a context of, we're in a messy moment, and um, the way out of that is to actually be intentional about, doing things that have a positive impact.
You talked about the four profiles, and I think that the way that he and it's two authors,
Yeah,
so Hoffman and Beato. But I think of like this is like Hoffman's book in some ways, right? So I think, and they talk about these four profiles as people who are part of the conversation, and they say, that these are voices that are going to be in the room. Like you have to accommodate that discussion. You said that you associate or you think of yourself more as a bloomer. When I read the book, I too was like, totally, I'm a bloomer, right? Um,
yeah,
People watching this might not have read the book. Could you give a
yeah,
brief outline of the bloomer profile? And while you're thinking about that, I'll
yeah,
say we do have people tuning in, and I'll just put it out there. This series is called Open-Ended Sessions,
yeah.
and the idea is to make this a conversation because it's unfinished, right? So if you who are tuning in have any questions for us or any comments, please drop them in the session chat. All right, Greg,
Yeah,
bloomers.
so bloomers, right? So I think I think the bloomers are optimists, right? I think that they believe in progress. I think that they believe that um, uh, there are opportunities that can be created by the emergence of new technology, and identifying opportunities to use that for positive outcomes. So I sort of fill in that space. I feel like that is my mindset. I'm not um, unaware of some of the challenges and issues and problems that are materializing because of this change or this moment that we're in. The environmental consequences of building data centers, the the background of, the how the content has been created. But I feel for me, and one of the reasons why I think I want to, sort of, I don't know if this is a pivot, but this is, kind of a change in the way that I want to operate. And this partnership that, you and I are putting together is to be intentional about helping organizations make the choices that make sense for them and allow them to be successful and do it in a way that's human and that we place humans in the center of the conversation. And so that's the kind of work that I want to do. And I think the bloomer category is someone who believes that the long-term impact of this is actually going to be good for society. It may be rough in the beginning, but there are positive outcomes to be had. But it means that we have to put the effort and the energy in to make sure that that happens.
Yeah, the way that the phrase that kept coming to my mind when I was reading the book is this is a glass half full
Yeah.
mindset, and but that doesn't mean you said it's an optimistic approach, right? That doesn't mean a Pollyanna approach to your point. Like this is
No.
there's a recognition that this is a very powerful technology, and like all powerful technologies, they need to be deployed mindfully. Now,
Yes.
the devil is in the details, right? Like the question is like, what does that mean? And they get into a bunch of things about regulation in the book, which I don't think we're going to be touching on here. But you mentioned when you were introducing the work that we're doing that we have decided to on focus our offerings toward small and medium businesses.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about this idea of superagency and what it might mean for small and medium businesses. And I have ideas about that, but I'd love to hear
Yeah.
your take on what those are.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's interesting is that small teams can do more things in a way, right? And so, and it's evidenced by some of our work, right? If you think about, one of our more recent engagements, we sort of discovered that an organization that we were helping was spending a significant amount of time doing administrative tasks to, uh, fulfill legal requirements and compliance requirements for their work. And talking vague because I just don't want to talk, say who it is or reduce or talk about what they are up to. Um, and that number was increasing over time, and it was hitting their margins, and they didn't really understand what was going on. And at a certain level, it was sort of like they were like a frog in water where you're turning the water on, and it was they're getting boiled by more and more content that they had to manage. And this was preventing them from doing the things that they wanted to do, the things that they valued, and the things that they felt differentiated them in the marketplace that they operated inside of. And so one of the things that we did is we worked with them to try to understand how they work, and from that discern what might be simple, small, practical things that they could automate or use AI to assist so that they could focus their attention on the things that were of high value to them. And so that's an allegory for, I think, what we can help small business with and medium-sized businesses is, I think you are the one who said this, like, no one loves to do the laundry. Well, some people do, but most people don't like to do the laundry. So let's help you do your laundry so that you can focus on the things that are really important to you. And we can talk a little bit about how we're doing that, but that's one thing. The second thing is I think small and medium business are much more willing to try things and experiment. And uh, you don't have the layers of bureaucracy that might sit in a larger organization around what you can and can't do. And so I think the opportunity for an innovation could be um, that's valuable, it might be higher.
I want to be to be fair, the laundry thing that comes from, I don't know how to pronounce her surname, but Joanna Maciejewska. I'm so
Okay.
sorry, I must be butchering that. And she put out a tweet um, saying that the problem with AI was directionality because um, basically we're trying to automate the wrong things, right? Like we've been automating writing and creating art and stuff like that. Um, when what we want is for AI to automate doing the dishes and the laundry so that we can focus on writing
Yeah,
and
yeah,
creating art, right? And I think that that's right. That's fundamentally right. And I think that it's also more, it feels to me, so again, these are all kind of emergent ideas, but it feels to me correct regarding the state of the technology itself. Uh,
yeah. I agree with you there too. Yeah, like is it ready for all of this like agent to agent conversation stuff that's going on? I don't think so. I think that is a maybe at some point in the future, but I think uh, what we found, in the engagement I was just talking about is in the abstract, technology alone isn't something that will land in an organization. You need to understand the culture of the organization. You need to understand how people work. You have to understand their mental models. You have to understand um, the flow of workflow. And we came up with this term, we call it workflow archaeology. Um, and it's a little bit different than service design practice and the UX space that we've come from, because it requires some additional investigation, but it leverages that skill set, right? So it's understanding the journey from start to finish of an outcome or a job or something that's valuable to an organization. And then you have to sort of dig in and see how that happens. And you have to understand, the information flow and the shape of the data and where it's stored and how it's managed. And then you have to understand, how people expect it to show up on their desktop or in any way that they work. And then you can affect change. And I think, or you can add a small intervention or a small evolution, and I like the word evolution versus reinvention, evolution that enables, a performance gain or improvement or, they unlock some extra capability that they've always wanted to do, but they haven't been able to do before. And you do that incrementally, and it's not that this moment is calling for us to just like blow up the firm and say start over. It's much more about, hey, let's give you let's get you up to speed on one thing so that not only do you have something that's of value, but you also start to understand how these things work, so that you as an organization can recognize how you want to use it and what it means to you and what's meaningful, and in the case of the organization that we were supporting, we delivered an outcome that did deliver some productivity gains. But their intention was not to do that to let go of people. Their intention was to be able to spend more time doing the things that they felt were of high value. And I think every organization is going to have some different calculus about what matters to them. But right now, these things have to be small and uh, they benefit from prototyping your way, making. We talked about this maker mindset earlier, and so I think that's kind of part of the journey that we want to help people take on is practical, straightforward things that you can do that add value as quickly as possible.
yeah, and that's I think that that's part of the maybe call it something like the actionable outcome of an engagement like this, right? Like the thing that you can take that you can fire up Monday morning and start doing that changes your workflows and hopefully relieves people in your team from drudgery. But I think that there's another level of value that comes from these engagements, which is that they help the organization get a sense of direction.
Yeah,
And, you
yeah.
know,
And Jorge, I think this is actually a really important piece of the puzzle. I mean, maybe you can talk a little bit about how we do that, but I think that is a really important perspective because I think many organizations, probably most organizations, are they don't know where to start. And if they are doing things, they're doing them in, kind of an unintentional way. And there's a fair amount of evidence that says that people are using AI, but it's actually not giving them any outcome, positive outcome. It's just actually burning time as people sort of, goof off or goof around with it. So, what's your perspective on that? Like, how do
well,
you think
you know,
why is that so important? And then how are we doing it?
well, the sense I get is that there must be a sense of like the emperor's new clothes in people's minds right now, in that you read the news and you see it's like, oh, there's these huge investments happening in these data centers, and organizations are cutting human positions to so that they can invest more in AI. And there must be a lot of people out there wondering, it's like, well, and what is the AI doing? Like, because I think that the experience that most people have had with these tools is through chatbots like ChatGPT. And what I've observed, and I think you've seen this as well in talking with folks, especially in small and medium businesses, is that there is curiosity about AI, like, and you can't help but be curious if you hear about it in the media, and everyone is talking about it. There's curiosity about it, and oftentimes what happens is the organization, the leadership in the organization will take someone in the firm, usually someone from IT, and they'll say, okay, you're the AI person, figure this out for us. And what that person does is they get a ChatGPT business account for the firm, and they give a few people in the company accounts, and then people start dabbling, and they start dabbling with trying to automate their workflows. And the workflows might be all over the place, but there's no step in the process, as far as I can tell, where people are given a mental model about what these tools are and how they work and how they can help.
Yeah,
And they're also not given, because it's being done in this kind of ad hoc way, they don't have a holistic understanding of where these tools fit into their information workflows.
yeah,
And I think one of the tenets that is kind of unacknowledged, but I think it's central to the work that we're doing, is the fact that all businesses nowadays, all modern businesses anyway, are in some sense information businesses. They have to move information. They have these information workflows where data moves through the org. And if you understand what the technologies can do, and you talked about us being like 8 weeks ahead, I think that that's a fair assessment, right? And the idea there is trying to get a grip on the capabilities and constraints of the tools. So that's one aspect of this, is like understanding what the tooling can do. And then you gain an understanding of the organization's information flows. Like, how is this organization operating, so that you can identify the areas where people are expending inordinate amounts of time and resources doing things that are necessary for the organization to function, but are not necessarily adding value to their customers, right? So all companies have to deal with some degree of bureaucracy. And my emergent sense is that particularly large language models can be really valuable in helping alleviate some of that tedium so that people can be released to focus their time on things that A, add more value to their customers, to their companies, but also that they enjoy more, right?
Mhm.
No one likes having to do red tape, so it's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so anyway, the point is, I think that part of the value that we're trying to bring to organizations through this process of workflow archaeology is that by understanding the information flows and where the tools might be able to help, the organization gains a new understanding of what the tooling can do and a sense of direction, so that it's like we're not going to reinvent the company from day one, but at least now we start having this emergent roadmap of where are the low-hanging fruit here, and let's start with a few very pragmatically chosen areas to focus on so that we can start gaining the competency internally to evolve towards that different state of being.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a couple of important points there. One, it's a journey that we are bringing our clients on so that they gain competency, right? So, one of the things that we've built into our engagements is part of what we're doing is we're teaching. We're showing you a methodology. We call it workflow archaeology, but we're showing you a methodology for understanding how to make the tacit explicit in an organization, how to identify in a way the IP of an organization, right? It's, the things it cares about, the culture, the business processes that are important to it, the things that make them, valuable inside of organizations. I do think that one of the things that, I think people may think in the back of their mind, there are many organizations, including small organizations, that might have, a role in the organization of for someone whose only job is red tape, and so that's also something to help people kind of recognize that, as these tools enable us to do these sort of more routine, repeat tasks more effectively, more efficiently, you'll need to help your people gain and acquire new skills or focus their attention and energy on things that are going to benefit the business in new ways. And I think one of the things that we're trying to promote is a perspective of evolution of your organization, not revolution of your organization, and that the people who work with you and for you are there with you. And I think that's another reason why I like small and medium-sized business, because small and medium-sized business owners are much more in relationship with their employees, right? They have many of these kinds of organizations are almost like families. And if they care about what they're trying to accomplish as a business and they care about their people, we can help them transition their organizations to take advantage of these tools and also grow their business or manage their business in a way that is meaningful for them. So I think it's a you know it's an interesting moment to be in.
There's another dimension to this, which is that the information itself, like if you buy into this idea that all businesses have these information flows that are part of the kind of like the life, the lifeblood of the organization, right? Um, the truth of the matter is that most organizations, even though that is true of them, they probably don't understand themselves in that light. And therefore, a lot of that information is also very um, managed in a very kind of ersatz way. It's certainly unstructured, right? So one of the things that we are learning, and maybe we can pivot now toward talking a little bit about some of the things that we've learned as part of this initial engagement. But one of the things that is evident when you start working with AI is that you're going to have an easier go of it if the information that you're working with, if the data is structured. And hey, guess what? AI can help you do a first pass at structuring the information, right? So, and I'm just mentioning that because you talked earlier about our being 8 weeks ahead as one of our differentiators. I think that another one of our differentiators, frankly, is that we come at this problem space from the perspective of information architecture and this kind of designerly approach of understanding how information is architected,
Yeah.
right? So that the idea is, like you were saying, to augment your people so
Mhm.
that they can create more value and enjoy the work more as they do. And one of the ways that that happens is by not just understanding the information, the flow of information, but also the state of the information and doing something about it. And that might be the doing something about it might have nothing to do with AI. It might be that you discover that your information systems are not up to speed to work with AI, right? And that you need to upgrade those. And what ends up happening maybe is that the AI thing ends up being kind of a MacGuffin for this broader transformation that probably needed to happen anyway. And
Right.
this is just kind of like the reason to get it done.
Yeah, and I think you're bringing up an important point there. Why, we don't call it workflow anthropology, right? I think we both have a design and research background, and we certainly want to research and understand how people work and see them at work. But the reason why we're calling it archaeology is that there's this new element, which is the structure of the data and the environment that we're working with. And small business tends to not even understand that. They just, they build, it's not a Rube Goldberg machine, but it's basically they've incrementally added technology over time and it connects different things to different things and they use different stuff and it becomes the way they work. And then you need to be able to unpack it and uh, you need to see how the humans in the system use it. So that might be the more anthropological lens or the research lens. But you also need to see the structure of that information and its compatibility in a way for large language models to make sense of it. And you intimated that there might be some work that needs to be done there to organize it, more successfully so that you can get better accuracy or that it's machine readable in some way. So, if it's almost like there's layers to the organization that you have to unpeel in this new moment that it's a little bit of service design, it's a little bit of user research, it's a little bit about spelunking into the technological platforms that organizations use. It's actually looking at the files, the artifacts that they have, and seeing, how they're formed and shaped, and are they, what degree of variety or variation exists in them. And so I think one of the things I think is really interesting about us is we're not really focused on a hypothesis when we come in. We really want to start with artifacts. We want to look at the substrate of the organization and explore it and understand it. And that's sort of like what archaeologists do. Like, you kind of dig a little bit of the dirt and you find, the first layer of civilization and you sort of come up with some thinking about what's going on. Then you dig the next layer of dirt and you find the next piece. And um, So I think that it's really important to actually understand how people actually get things done. And then you can make suggestions about what to do. And one of the lessons that we learned recently with one of this engagement that we are talking about is we saw a process, and we were like, wow, if you did this differently and you did this differently and you did this differently, you could get this huge productivity gain, and here's how you could do it. And it was almost like the management consulting version of like showing up with hypothesis, and the ROI would be like, this enormous number. And our client just kind of looked at us and went, that doesn't feel right to us, and we don't believe you, and we don't understand this, right? And so we had to kind of reset and say, okay, what's important to you in the way that you work? And we found one kind of key insight that drove an outcome that they did not want to change. It was cultural, and it was important to them. And so from that, we are like, oh, okay, now we know this. We have to get really small. We have to get micro. We have to look at like one small improvement that we could make. And we did it, right? And it was really valuable to them. And so now they're on this path of like, hey, this actually makes sense. What's the next small thing we could do? Right. And so this is, I think, the part of our perspective, which is to take people on a journey by, one nugget at a time, or one, um, and I'll probably overuse the archaeological meme, but we'll dig another layer down. So.
I think that you started touching on something there that I wanted to expand on because we actually have a question from Catherine in the chat.
Yeah.
She says, can you talk more about the deliverables to the orgs and businesses supported? I like the term emergent roadmap. What would that include? Detailed documentation, how-to guides? So what do we deliver, Greg?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we have done is we prototype. So we prototype from the beginning. So we're constantly making, kind of give you the outline of the things that we did, and we want to continue doing. We ran a workshop with our client around how they work, tried to help them identify jobs to be done, or workflows or outcomes that were materially important to the firm that they were spending a lot of time on. And then we started making stuff with them, right? So we went into the artifacts, and we went into their data, and we explored the art of the possible, and would it create value? And we did that together. And as we started to kind of learn through that process, two things happened. One, they started learning how to use these tools, and we're surprised about the efficacy of the results. And also we were surprised. Sometimes we were like, wow, that didn't work, or that could work if our data structure was more organized. Oh, shoot, we need to go do that before we can actually make this happen. Um, and I think in the end, one of the things that we did build, we built an agent, but it's not an autonomous one. It's one that you work with, and and actually there was a huge aha in there. I don't know, maybe Jorge, you were more involved with this, and you might want to talk about how important it is to understand the discernment of an organization, and the collective knowledge in being able to build something that can sort through and triage and do the right work. Like, how did you do that? Like, what, like, talk a little bit about that, the last mile of the effort that we did.
Yeah, and you talked about starting with prototypes, and you also use the word last mile, which is, I think that that's right, because it's prototyping throughout the process, right? Because you also talked earlier about skepticism, and I think
Yeah.
that that is a symptom or a trait that I expect that we're going to encounter a lot because I think a lot of people suspect that there's a lot of hype around this stuff. And quicker that you can get to testing hypotheses, validating hypotheses, right? When we did the first pass at the workflow archaeology thing in this engagement, we came out with a couple of hypotheses about what might be good uses for AI in this context. And the immediate next step should be, hey, what's the minimal test that we can do to validate this hypothesis? Because it might be that the data's not there. It might be that the culture is not there. It might be, and this is, I think, now going to your question, it might be that the knowledge that needs to be articulated as part of this AI assistant or agent or whatever you want to call it is um, so kind of dispersed culturally in the org and not described in an explicit way, right? So a lot of the knowledge that if you want to use tools that help augment people's work, you have to get people to express what it is that they do
And
so
what they
that it
think is
can.
important, right? And not important, right?
Exactly. And the thing is, like, and again, you and I have been doing design work for a long time. You know that people don't tell you what they do. That you have to actually you have to find other ways of getting that out, right? And and prototyping is one way to do it, right? So it's a way to get that done. So that is one of the I think that is one of the deliverables to Catherine's question. But she also to honor this notion of the emergent roadmap. The other thing that we worked on in parallel is basically a business case, right?
Yeah.
So that it's not just it's like we're building a proof of concept here, something that is like the minimal test, the minimal validation of whether there's any there. But if that test proves successful, then what would it mean to scale this? What
Yeah.
would it mean to get it into production? And you want to come out of this process, like I said, like part of the value here is getting a sense of direction. You want to come out of this process not just with a tool that someone can use to, automate a particular workflow, but also a sense of direction of where could we go next? And how do we take this initial experiment and start moving it so that it has a larger impact? And one way to do that, well, I think that the response or the grown-up way to do that is to start putting numbers to it and having the numbers be realistic so that leadership can make decisions about whether this is something that they want to invest in or not.
Yeah, and I think we had another aha there, which is, we invested in building a pretty comprehensive model. We did time on task, and we understood the billable rates and the cost of the team and how much time it took to accomplish things. So we could give a very accurate picture of if the evolution that we were promoting, the prototype that we had was utilized at a certain level by the organization, they could get this outcome. What was really interesting was and unexpected, and I think it's something that I think we want to do in our future engagements, is they asked a really good question, which is, okay, now that we have more time, because this effort that we've solved is going to give us some time back. What do we use it for? Right. And that was like, wow, that is a really interesting. And I think it's one of the things that's interesting about a small and medium business. Their perspective was, we don't need less people. Their perspective was, okay, we've reduced some aspect that we don't want to do in the organization. Now, how can we use this to, this gift of time back, let's call it, towards something that was meaningful for us? And what's the value of that to the firm, right? And And that's a little harder for us to sort of solve for, but it's something that we can facilitate in a conversation around, goals and outcomes. And, one of the things I think is interesting about our work is I think our last client walked away with a recognition of part of their business they didn't actually even understand and the implication of that business. And they didn't even understand that, that part of their business that they've done forever and done a certain way was actually consuming more time over time. And it was like a frog being boiled, in water. Like eventually, if they hadn't paid attention to it, eventually it would cut their margins to a point where the business would be less successful. And they wouldn't understand why, right? So, this process of kind of workflow archaeology is it's not just about the technology. It's about helping identify and help you see yourself as an organization, and then ideally craft a path towards a better outcome for you as an organization. And to come back to the question that was asked, one of the things we did early on that I think is really important is that we help them prioritize the outcomes and workflows against the current state of AI. And so that gave them some confidence about, okay, and we had this 2x2 framework where, the upper right quadrant was, high value, easy to do, right? And so we're like, you should just work on those right now, right? The others all sound really cool and it could be transformational and, amazing and science fiction, but let's work on the practical things that are of high value that conceptually have high value. And by the way, let's help you discover what those are, because they may not be the things that people talk about, because the things that they think are high value are the things they love to do, which is true. But in terms of pushing an organization forward or allowing it to achieve its goals, the things that are necessary often are very important. And if you can make those more straightforward, they're the benefits are accretive over time. And so I think, part of what we left them with is a roadmap of like, what's the next workflow that they should go tackle. And they don't need us anymore to do it, which is the interesting thing too. We taught them how to do it.
I wanted to circle back to something you said because it was very intentional on our part, which was this idea of helping the client understand their current state better.
Mhm.
When we had originally talked through the offering, what we were going to be offering these folks, we had called it, we had like riffed on an old Velvet Underground song and called it We'll Be Your Mirror. You remember
Yeah,
that?
right.
And that's because of this idea that this technological disruption, opportunity, however you want to frame it, does present one of these rare moments where you can um, take a step back and examine the state of what you're doing. Organizations are systems, and long-running organizations are complex systems that have evolved over time to perform the functions that they're performing. Um, and these engagements present the rare opportunity to take a step back and take stock on how the thing is operating, how the system is working.
Mhm.
And obviously, you want to improve how it's working. That's the whole point of the engagement. But at a minimum, like if you get nothing else out of it, having that high level picture, even if for just a part of the business, is really valuable. I want to pivot here because we have about 6 minutes left.
Yeah.
And by the way, Catherine is following up and saying that they work in government and this process is very applicable there in addition to small and medium-sized businesses. Yes, I believe that that's right, Catherine. And when we say small and medium-sized businesses, departments within large organizations sometimes function like small and medium-sized businesses, right? So um, they do have, enterprises have different constraints, which make them slightly different animal. And I suspect that government does as well. But that's a good point. What I wanted to suggest, Greg, is given that we only have about 5 minutes left here,
Yeah.
and we didn't plan this beforehand. So again, very emergent, unfinished conversation, right?
Yeah.
Um, what would be one takeaway for folks tuning in? Something that maybe they can do differently or think differently about this new technology that I, I don't know if I want to complicate it by saying like might be counterintuitive or might be surprising, right? Something that we've learned that might help them.
Yeah, I mean, I think culture is really important. So I think, people talk about how culture eats strategy for lunch, right? You do need to understand what's important to people. And then you can anchor, this kind of work into that so that it feels like it's part of um, something that people are on the journey together. Um, that may be altruistic and optimistic of me to say that, but I personally, I think one of the reasons why you and I are doing this is that we want to see real impact, and we want to see impact that is meaningful and that humans have agency in the conversation. And so, if you just talk about the technology, um, you're not going to understand that there's some aspect of the way that people are currently working that will, stop you from being able to make progress unless you understand it. And if you understand it, then you can use that as an anchor to, to drive, something forward. So, don't ignore culture.
I love that. You said culture is important, and I will add to that that culture is also fragile,
Very.
and and has a dysfunctional culture. They probably leadership probably wants to change that. But I would expect that maybe those folks aren't looking to institute to add AI to the mix, necessarily. So, assuming that the culture in your organization is a healthy one, which was, I think, certainly the case with our client, then I think a question becomes, how do you introduce such a disruptive technology into an organization without ruining its culture? You know,
Yeah.
and I think that that is also it's yet another reason to delve into the new space, but do it very mindfully and not with a goal of like, let's transform the whole thing from the ground up on day one, but rather, let's take this one step at a time. Let's make it so that it is true to who you are as an organization and helps you become more of who you are as opposed to like try to change you into something that is something completely unrecognizable or something like that.
Yeah, and also to allow you to recognize what change you will have to go through, right? I mean, this isn't going, even for the small organizations that or medium-sized organizations that we're talking about, there is going to be some disruption, and there's going to be impact, and there are going to be roles that are changed. But you know, do it in a way that is intentional, mindful, and you understand the implications of it. Don't just do it. And so that's why I think it's really important. I know that's more than one thing, but I think that's and I think make stuff. I think this is the other thing that to help impress people that but don't just make anything. Make something that be focused on the thing that you make first. And then that may not have a benefit, but at least you're focused on it. And then you learn and then make the next thing, make the next thing. Don't do everything all at once. Like be focused and intentional about the evolution of your organization. And if we can help organizations do that, then I think you can give them comfort about their own trajectory, and and leadership will have agency. And ideally, they can communicate that to their employees that they can evolve together in this new environment versus it happening to them.
Yeah, that's a super agency thing, right? Like it's not being imposed on me. I'm being a participant in this.
Yeah.
We are at time. I think this was a great first conversation. We'll have more of these. Folks who want to follow up with us, our website is Unfinished without the D. So Unfinished, it's like Unfinished, but without the D, unfinished.com. And we do have a Substack where we're going to be posting, hopefully fairly regularly, what we learn. And that's at thoughts.unfinished.com. So unfinished thoughts, basically. Um, all right, Greg, thank you. And we'll let folks know when we have another one of these scheduled.
Thanks, Jorge.
And thank you, everyone who tuned in, by the way.